How far should my 7-iron go? Especially when so many 7-irons are completely different lofts. So let me simply show you what distance each of these irons should be going at different speeds. But for you guys where speed isn't a problem, why can't you get the distances I'm about to show you, and what head type's actually going to make that better? Because at 88 miles an hour, specifically with this head right here, we should be getting definitely more than 157 carry. Just like this, for example. God, these heads are absolutely jacked. How head, loft design, ball speed makes the biggest difference when it comes to carry with these irons, and it's not necessarily technology. I saw a video from Matt from Golf Liberty doing a great video on this, very simple understanding on how much distance you should be getting with a 7-iron. But I want to expand on that video a touch when it comes to head loft, as we've all been there with a mate on a par 3 going, what did you hit there? And they go 7-iron, where realistically they're hitting a 5 and you're hitting, well, a 7. For example, this TaylorMade Stealth is at 28 degrees compared to the 30.5 degrees of the P790 and the 34 degrees of the P7MC. And don't get me wrong, there's room for all of these irons for every golfer out there, and this wants to be a simple guide for you guys. If you want to fit yourself second hand, get you close to the mark, well, I feel like this video is going to be the one for you. And to further your understanding on how your ball is going to go further, we have to understand ball speed, we have to understand launch angle, and we definitely have to understand spin. And how can you possibly change that with, well, technique? So before we go into the 70 mile an hour, 80 mile an hour, 90 mile an hour, and I'll do one at 100 miles an hour anyway, I do want you to understand ball speed is a big factor when it comes to making backspin in general. To make it very simple, hardly any backspin because, well, hardly any ball speed, versus a swing that is a lot faster and potentially too spinny of a technique. Almost 8,000 worth of backspin. These are my test subjects, not for any particular reason, but I normally fit golfers into a loft of head, meaning you can go any brand if you want. You can go any year over the last 8 years and pretty much get the same results, because as loft increases, the heads get smaller, they're less offset, and when the loft decreases, the heads are bigger, they're more offset, because that's typically what the player is after in any of these typical head designs. However, this video is not all about distance, and when does distance become actually a hindrance, which I'll explain why at the end, and why you would even go to something less forgiving. What's the point in getting something less forgiving in this game? And it'll all become clear at the end. Now, I mentioned ball speed being a factor, but how can a ball that potentially produces less ball speed than some other options actually be better for you in getting distance? And again, all that will become clear as we change these throughout the testing. So with that contradictory statement out of the way, Vice Golf still have their offer live for their golf balls up to 20% off and 25% off their apparel, so that if any of these golf balls sing to you and make sense, especially if they're a more affordable line of ball than the one you're currently using at the moment, I'll leave the link in the description down below. 70 miles an hour, optimal numbers, 3 different irons, all with a red graphite shaft. 73.3, not that far off. I'll try and get the other two very similar. Quick note, these won't all be in a row as I'm not a robot, so as long as the impact numbers are similar, i.e. club head speed, club path, angular attack, then basically I'll keep the best one, so we have a very similar test between all of these irons. Before I clear all of those up, there's something to note. The Stealth was the easiest to get that 70 miles an hour and half decent numbers. P790, probably about another 5, 6, 7, 10 shots, something like that more. Almost 15, 16 trying to get it with a P7MC. So there's definitely a forgiveness element going on with this test. As I said at the start, and you'll see through this video, ball speed has a direct impact on total spin, as long as the numbers stay the same. So obviously I'll show you how club path and angular attack and all that kind of stuff plays a difference. But as you can see, in terms of descent angle, progressively higher through the irons, meaning more stopping power. And obviously you should see a drop off in distance. But here's why technique plays such a part in launch and spin as well, because the P790 went further because I was more on the inside and I hit less down on it. So basically hitting more of that draw shot, which naturally drops spin, hence why it's gone further, even though it's very similar in club head speed. However, I wouldn't fit that person into a 5-iron as our spin's already too low on decent numbers and decent launch, meaning any less loft won't necessarily mean any more carry. 7 wood or a 5 hybrid would be a good addition because it's just going to help keep that launch up high in the air and then obviously give you a tiny bit more than what a 6 iron would be in the P790 or the Stealth. The other side is I picked the 3 that I hit well at those numbers. So yes, these all have the potential to go that distance at that particular clubhead speed. But what about that 70-mile-an-hour swing that comes over the top, is inconsistent with their strike, leaves the club out to the right-hand side? Well, then a more forgiving, more offset head is certainly going to help that particular player. Not to mention a steep over-the-top swing is going to make your launch too low at this speed and your spin too high. And this would be one of the reasons if you swing at 70 miles an hour, you get nowhere near 150 yards in terms of carry distance. The point I'm trying to make through this whole video is these are 3 very different head types. However, technique is the reason that I'm getting bigger distances than some of you guys. As an example, I'll swing a lot faster than 70 miles an hour, cupped wrist, therefore releasing a lot earlier, over the top, quite steep. And you'll notice, even though I swung a lot faster, in terms of overall distance, I wasn't that much more at 70 miles an hour, even though I swung at 90. And for a very de-lofted offset head, I sure was able to get a lot of backspin with it. But for that particular golfer, it makes sense to not necessarily use something that will spin more, i.e. the Vice Tour, any 3-piece ball, but actually use something a bit more affordable. If you want something low spinning, the more affordable balls will be lower spinning. Those veteran golfers that have a tidy short game and rarely lose a golf ball, the Pro Air does something very similar, but with a urethane cover. 80 miles an hour, here's where it gets interesting. Just using a steel light reg flex shaft. 81.5, there she is. Now there's a few things to cover and highlight here because there is one slight mishap, hence why the P7MC kind of went the same distance, but you'll get the gist. If you look at this is kind of what I want you to check at this kind of range. If you spin the ball too much, i.e. hit that cut fade, well then the Stealth is going to actually be more towards where that yellow line is. Obviously, I hit more of like a hook draw, which we'll talk about in numbers. So the P7MC is better for me because, well, I'm actually going to get the stopping power down on the ball. However, please be aware I did swing the P7MC a tiny bit faster, hence why it was clinging on to the P790 more than I was expecting. But it makes sense why irons are designed the way they are. I hook draw basically all my shots, so I don't need as much offset. I need to fight the left as much as I can. And because I want to increase my spin, not decrease my spin, this higher lofted 7 iron makes sense. But I find the middle more often than not. If I don't find the middle, I come down on it, I spin the ball too much, I launch it out to the right hand side. Forgiving, offset, makes sense. Very popular in the middle, higher launch, still very low spinning to be fair at this kind of speed. However, to prove a point, this thing obviously can produce a lot of backspin. With that steep over the top swing, no wonder the P790 is so popular because it drops that spin and gives you that element of forgiveness. 83 miles an hour, 19 degrees launch, very steep down on the ball, 7,000 worth of backspin, meaning it's hitting the brakes at 146. And if you're struggling to get any more distance at 80 miles an hour, it's not the technology, it's your club path, your launch angle, which is affecting your spin so much. So have a look at that first before trying to upgrade your irons again. Vice Tour is what I'd use for around that kind of club head speed. Obviously, if you lose tons of balls, use the Vice Drive, but it will give you a tiny bit more spin in those mid-range shots. And for you better players that want more spin and want that intermediate amount of spin before we go on to the next one, Vice Pro around that area. 90 miles an hour, this is where it can be dangerous, and I'll explain how head design can cost you a lot more shots than you think. A tiny bit fast, 93.8. It's really well hit though. I think we'll keep that one. As I said at the start, the more ball speed you have, the more backspin you're going to have with any type of golf club there is. And in terms of descent angle and backspin, don't get me wrong, majority of these are going to stop on a green. But there's three things to note. Number one, the more offset they are, the more I felt I had to drive my hands forward of the ball to basically hit it straight and not hook it, and that's just down to my swing, hence the launch getting lower. Number two is a lot of better players, especially the pros, de-loft all their clubs. They have that closed face at the top of their swing, like here, for example. Therefore, they can drive their 7-iron into the ball, keep a lower launch angle, maintain spin, and therefore get a much more penetrating flight because they don't want distance. The last thing to note is I was using the Vice Tour for those last 3 shots, and now I'm going to use the Pro Plus with the P7 MC, meaning my launch is even lower, but my spin's increased. Therefore, my descent angle is quite similar to, well, the longer irons that I was hitting earlier. The point is, over 90 miles an hour, 93 miles an hour, you don't want your 7-iron to go further than 180 yards because it's incredibly difficult to control in windy conditions, and you want less distance and tighter dispersion. And if I did go at this full pace, harder I hit it, the higher it's going to go with not that much more distance, meaning, well, the wind can take it any which way it likes. Considering this is the first test that I've ever done with these 3 heads and hit them all in a row, is that out the middle with good technique, they weren't that too far away from each other. However, if you want ultimate forgiveness and help with the right, this is your choice. If you still want help in terms of dropping the spin and getting half decent launch, well, no wonder the P790 is so popular. And if you middle 90% of your irons and want a low penetrating ball flight to work towards, well then these kind of head styles is where you have to go. Guys, if you've got any questions on your golf bag or golf game, sasgolfacademy.com. I'll catch you guys later.